Roughly 7,000 years ago, somewhere across the grasslands of the ancient Middle East, a human being looked down at a pouch of milk that had gone horribly wrong. It had separated. Part of it had turned into pale, rubbery lumps floating in a thin, cloudy liquid. By every instinct that kept early humans alive, this was spoiled. This was a warning. And yet someone took a bite. That single decision, made by a person whose name we will never know, set off a chain of events that would feed empires, fund monasteries, and end up in nearly every refrigerator on the planet. This is the story of cheese, and it is far stranger, older, and more beautiful than you think. To understand where cheese came from, you have to picture a world without it. Imagine the early herding communities of the Neolithic era, thousands of years before the pyramids, before writing, and before the wheel was common. These people had just begun keeping animals, goats, sheep, and early cattle. Milk was a tempting source of food, but it came with a brutal problem. Most adult humans back then simply could not digest it. Fresh milk made them sick. The sugar in milk, lactose, was something their bodies couldn't break down once they grew past childhood. So, milk was a gift that fought back. But milk does not stay milk for long. Left in warm air, it sours and separates on its own. And here is where the accident likely happened. Early herders sometimes stored milk inside containers made from the stomachs of young animals. Those stomachs contained an enzyme called rennet, the same substance a calf uses to curdle its mother's milk for digestion. When milk met that enzyme, inside a warm pouch carried under the sun, it transformed. The liquid split into solid curds and watery whey. Someone eventually ate the curds, and they discovered something remarkable. It didn't make them sick. The process had broken down much of the lactose. The food that once fought back had been tamed. We are not just guessing at this. In the marshlands of what is now Poland, archaeologists uncovered fragments of clay pottery riddled with tiny holes, like ancient strainers. When scientists analyzed the residue trapped in that pottery, they found traces of milk fat, the chemical signature of separating curds from whey. Those fragments are around 7,000 years old. They are some of the oldest evidence of cheesemaking ever found. A prehistoric cheese strainer sitting in cold European soil, waiting 7 millennia to tell its story. And once humans understood this transformation, everything changed. Because cheese was not just food. Cheese was time itself, held still. Think about what fresh milk meant to ancient people. It was abundant in spring and summer when animals were producing, and then it was gone. It spoiled within a day. There were no refrigerators and no freezers, no way to carry it across long distances. But cheese? Cheese could last. A wheel of hard cheese could survive for months, even years, locked away in a cool cellar. The nutrition of summer milk could be eaten deep in the dead of winter. For nomadic herders crossing vast distances, and for farming villages bracing against famine, this was nothing short of survival. Cheese became one of humanity's first great technologies. Not a tool of stone or bronze, but a way of bending time, turning something perishable into something that endured. As civilizations rose, cheese rose with them. In ancient Egypt, archaeologists exploring a tomb near the desert sands discovered a cracked clay jar containing a solidified white mass, more than 3,000 years old. It was cheese, buried with the dead, meant to nourish them in the afterlife. In ancient Greece, cheese was so important it appeared in their myths. The Greeks believed the gods themselves had gifted cheesemaking to humanity, and Homer wrote of the Cyclops curdling milk in his cave. Cheese was food worthy of legend. But it was the Romans who turned cheese into an industry. In grand Roman villas and bustling city kitchens, cheesemaking became a refined craft. Wealthy households had dedicated cheese kitchens, separate rooms designed specifically for curdling, pressing, and aging. The Romans experimented with smoking cheese, adding herbs, and aging different varieties for different tastes. And as the Roman legions marched across Europe, from the hills of Gaul to the cold edges of Britain, they carried their cheese-making knowledge with them. Roman soldiers received cheese as part of their rations. Everywhere the empire spread, the craft of cheese spread too, planting seeds that would grow into the great cheese traditions of Europe. Then Rome fell, and you might expect the story of cheese to fall with it. Instead, it found an unlikely new home behind the stone walls of monasteries. In the quiet centuries of medieval Europe, while much of the continent struggled, monks became the unlikely masters of cheese. Think about what a monastery offered: stable land, animals, cool stone cellars, and above all, time, and patient, careful people with the discipline to experiment across years and decades. Monks treated cheesemaking almost as a form of devotion. They recorded what worked. They refined techniques for washing rinds, encouraging certain molds, and aging cheese to precise textures and flavors. Many of the most famous cheeses in the world today trace their origins to these monastery kitchens. Recipes guarded and perfected by monks who saw beauty in the slow transformation of milk into something extraordinary. And that word, transformation, brings us to the secret at the very heart of cheese. Because to make cheese is to do something that sounds almost insane. You are taking milk and you are very carefully, very deliberately allowing it to rot. But you are controlling exactly how. Here is what is actually happening inside a wheel of cheese. When cheesemakers add cultures to milk, they are introducing armies of microscopic life, bacteria, and in many cheeses, mold. These microorganisms feed on the milk, breaking down its fats and proteins, releasing acids and compounds that create flavor and aroma. As a cheese ages in a cellar, this invisible world goes to work. The sharp bite of an aged cheddar, the creamy funk of a soft ripened wheel, the blue vein streaking through a piece of Roquefort, all of it is the result of living organisms quietly feasting inside. The blue in blue cheese is mold, deliberately introduced, then encouraged to grow through tiny channels poked into the wheel so air can reach it. What looks like spoilage on any other food is, in cheese, the entire point. Cheesemakers are not preventing decay, they are conducting it, like an orchestra. Let that reshape how you see the cheese drawer in your fridge. Each piece is a tiny contained ecosystem, a landscape of microbial life, frozen at the exact moment its maker decided it was perfect. You are not just eating dairy, you are eating controlled time, and the work of billions of organisms you will never see. And because this transformation depends so deeply on its environment, on the local air, the local bacteria, the specific grass the animals eat, cheese became one of the most powerful expressions of place on Earth. This is why true Parmigiano Reggiano can only come from a specific region of Italy, made the same way it has been for centuries. It is why authentic Roquefort is aged in particular limestone caves in the south of France, where a native mold drifts through the cool air and settles into the cheese. These aren't just brand names. They are protected by law in many places, tied to the exact soil and air and tradition that created them. A cheese can be a fingerprint of an entire region, a taste that exists nowhere else in the world because the living things that make it exist nowhere else either. For thousands of years, this is how cheese remained. Local, slow, and tied to the land and the hands that made it. But then came an era that would change cheese more dramatically than anything since that first accidental bite. The Industrial Revolution arrived, and with it, the factories. In the 1800s, cheesemaking began moving out of small farms and monasteries and into large-scale production. Then came a scientific breakthrough that reshaped all of dairy: pasteurization, the process of heating milk to kill harmful bacteria. Suddenly, milk could be made safer and shipped further. Cheese production exploded in scale. And in the early 20th century, an entrepreneur perfected a way to process and emulsify cheese into a smooth, shelf-stable product that wouldn't separate or spoil quickly. The processed cheese slice was born, the kind wrapped in plastic, melting perfectly onto a burger. Purists recoiled, but it made cheese cheaper, more consistent, and more accessible than ever before in human history. Cheese had gone from a survival food to a monastery art to a global commodity stacked in supermarket aisles around the world. And the scale of it today is genuinely staggering. Humans now produce billions of pounds of cheese every single year. There are thousands of distinct varieties, from delicate fresh cheeses eaten within days to massive aged wheels guarded for years before they are ever cut. Whole regions build their economies and identities around it. Festivals celebrate it. Competitions judge it. In some places, wheels of cheese are still treated almost like treasure, even used as collateral for loans, sitting in vast climate-controlled vaults like gold in a bank. But strip all of that away, the factories, the festivals, the thousands of varieties, and you arrive back at the same quiet miracle that started it all. Cheese is still, at its core, what it always was. It is milk, transformed by life and time into something that can outlast the season, the year, and even the person who made it. So the next time you hold a piece of cheese, pause for a moment. You are holding the endpoint of a 7,000-year experiment that began with one curious, possibly very hungry human, staring at a pouch of milk gone wrong and deciding to take a bite anyway. You are holding preserved sunlight and summer grass. You are holding the work of monks and Romans and nameless herders stretching back before recorded history. And you are holding a living thing, still quietly changing, a small piece of time held still in your hand. Not bad for something we discovered entirely by accident. If stories like this, the hidden history behind everyday things, are what you're here for, then stick around and subscribe. There is a whole world of the ordinary waiting to be made extraordinary. And it all started with a little spoiled milk.